This one's from Farrister, and I don't know anything about this video, but the title, Star Citizen's Insurance Problem. I've talked about this subject about insurance in Star Citizen for years. Big part of it creates this lack of risk in the game. People do not care whether they live or die in so many scenarios. And for a game that, their goal is permadeath and actually caring about your death, it is quite weird to have. At the same time, we have a game that is incredibly buggy and very, very much in an alpha state, where anytime they've tried to make a slight change to things in relation to insurance or claim timers or anything, the community has raged. So this is a very polarizing subject. This is a very interesting one. And this is one of, if not the most important features to get right for Star Citizen to have success. That, the economy, and the law system are up there for me. I'm sure there's a couple other ones that I'm just, are escaping my mind at the moment. But insurance and creating reasons for players to want to stay alive is something that's really, really important. I just don't know if it's really, really important with the current state of the game, but it's always important to have that conversation. So once again, this is Farrister, Star Citizen's Insurance Problem.
If you're a big Star Citizen player, you probably have a good idea of the lengths to which people will go to in order to chase LTI on their packages, the holy grail of lifetime insurance that may protect your real-world purchase in the game world. But of course,
in case people don't know what LTI is, I'm sure he's going to get into it, but I think the best assumption to understand what LTI is the exact insurance system that we have now. You pay nothing and you get your ship back in a period of time that's quite long, and you could pay extra to speed up that process. You never lose the ship. At the original sale of LTI said that you would get your ship stock back if you did any aftermarket upgrades. Those would not return with you. Currently, that's not the case, and you get all of your aftermarket upgrades. We don't know what direction they're going to go, whether they're going to keep aftermarket or not. So that is definitely one of the polarizing things. I am of the opinion where I'm a little bit unsure if I want to lose all the components on death, lose some of the components on death, lose all the components if you go to a place like Pyro, lose none of the components if you die in a place like Terra. So I'm still unsure about how I feel about it, but certainly the risk of loss would make players want to stay alive longer, right? And with the idea of the ability to repair from soft death being an intended feature, stuff like that is also real important. I've always argued for an escape for Tarkov-like insurance system, which basically is the moment your ship dies, there is a timer, and let's say that timer is 24 hours. After that period of 24 hours, since we have a persistent system, the game will know whether or not the items on your ship have been looted or not. What does your ship look like in its current state? So if your power plant was pulled out, if your quantum drive was pulled out, let's say those two things were removed from your ship by the person who killed you, then those would become stock after 24 hours when you get your ship back or something like that, and you get a loaner in between. It's, again, this is why I don't know what I want to do, because it's still like, okay, well, do I really have to wait 24 hours to fly that ship again? And there's all sorts of questions, right? So that is why this video is so interesting and why I clicked on it, because, man, there is no right or perfect answer to this, I don't think.
The risk of the insurance model is that potentially means that real-world purchases might end up in in-game situations in which they're not protected. I'm Farrister, and this video will explore why that's potentially a ticking time bomb for Star Citizen. The developers have been very quiet on the issue of insurance, at least in recent times. Go back to 2012 and there's an article on the Star Citizen website all about insurance, how it'll work, and how it'll protect original backers with lifetime insurance.
On things like this, CIG has had a decent track record to try and develop based off of the original ideas. They try to stay within the parameters of a lot of those things. I don't know exactly what the article said.
The article talks about how all ships would have in-game insurance, and those who backed first would have a little perk of lifetime insurance for their ship, which was mostly a minor convenience in not having to pay those in-game costs.
And then FOMO happened. Then they realized that people wanted to buy LTI. I actually, a funny story, I've told this before. My original ship was an Aurora LN. That was the first ship I ever bought in Star Citizen. And I bought in the day after they no longer offered lifetime insurance to ships in Star Citizen, because there was a date where they said, we will never offer lifetime insurance again. Sound familiar, F8C owners? Sound familiar? Oh, yeah.
The article goes on to say that insurance policies sold with ships will begin to have a timer attached, and that uninsured ships lost in-game would need to be repurchased with in-game currency. In other words, ships bought with real money that are destroyed without a game insurance in place would be lost. Now,
That's sort of, and I imagine that's going to change pretty heavily. How does it work in Elite Dangerous? You don't pay the full amount of like when your ship explodes. You pay like a percentage, right?
This is where things get tricky, because clearly the idea of players spending hundreds of dollars on virtual spaceships that could potentially be destroyed in-game, and if that happened with those ships in an uninsured state, that cash lost permanently, is a frightening prospect.
That cash is not lost permanently, because I guess the legal argument would be, and I think it would be very simple, the legal argument would be that you do not have to insert more cash to get that ship back. So I don't think that that's actually an argument that ship is lost. I'd be curious what other people think about that. When you buy okay, so let's use the Elite Dangerous example again. When I buy Elite, I get whatever that Dorito looking ship is. I don't know the answer to it. When I die, I do have to pay a fee to get that ship back, right? Is that the same thing as I paid and now I don't get it back? The Sidewinder, right? So I think this is a little bit of a weird argument from Farrister, but I understand what he's saying, because once we get into the larger ships and the amount of money you would have to pay insurance-wise to get them back would be quite large, it would certainly feel like they would be lost, right? And again, you don't have to insert more real money to get them back, but you do have to spend that time and effort to get them back, which I've noticed from the wonderful Star Citizen community that I've been interacting with for 10 years is that they don't want to make any effort. They want and they don't want to play. In a lot of cases, I paid, therefore I don't have to grind, right? And that's the big problem with this that goes against what, honestly, and they are in the majority. I'm of the grinder type, and I feel like I'm very much in the minority. I don't agree with them at all. It's fine. I understand their perspective. They have a job, a bunch of kids, and a life, and they only have a couple of hours to play. My argument has always been that you are able to achieve everything that I'm able to achieve, even if I play Star Citizen 8 hours a day and you play it 1 hour a day. It's just going to take you 8 times longer, but you're able to achieve it. And guess what? For a game like Star Citizen, that's an MMO, and MMOs tend to go on for many, many years, and the intention is for them never to close, then what is the point of that mindset? There is no rush. There is no end date, right? So you're able to achieve everything I'm able to achieve. I just do it a little bit earlier than you. So I've always felt that way. But again, I don't feel like the ship is completely lost. So
That's why many players chase packages with LTI or lifetime insurance to know that the money they spend out of game is to some extent protected for as long as they play in-game. Whilst the idea of having a cost to insure your ship in-game to cover the risk of loss does make sense from a gameplay perspective, the risk of losing your real money purchase makes less sense. And whilst none of this matters in-game yet, whilst Star Citizen is still in alpha testing, this issue that the developers have been so silent on for some time is a ticking time bomb. The moment that somebody loses their $900 space yacht permanently because they didn't buy insurance in-game, well, you can just imagine how the news outlets would jump on that. The other elephant in the room is that of insurance inflation. Back in 2012...
Do we go to Eve then, again, as an example? Like, I feel like a lot of people are trying to make like legal arguments. I don't think Farrister is. I think he just said that, yeah, the outlets would go crazy, right? In Eve, you buy ISK, and then you buy ships with that ISK, maybe. I don't play Eve, so I don't know. But, you know, they always apply the real world value of, like, we lost $300,000 worth of ships. Nobody's suing them, right? So... yeah, it's like literally good marketing for Eve, which is funny, right? So
the original backers all got lifetime insurance on ships purchased to that point, but new packages from then came with a set insurance term on them, starting at about 2 months of in-game insurance coverage. Since that point, the amount of insurance included in different bundles has increased during strategic events through the years, like the anniversary intergalactic aerospace in November, and most recently, that's upwards of 10 years attached. So, if you bought the same ship in 2012, you might have 2 months attached, versus today, it might be 10 years. Whilst often the price of game packages has gone up in that time, clearly the difference in the level of in-game protection for that is notable. Another unknown within this all is the future of Star Citizen's funding model. Clearly, whilst in development, a key pillar of that game funding is driven by ship sales, with many players often buying multiple ships. And to some extent, that's supported by the inflation of insurance offerings, with players often choosing to change ship, play the CCU game, or even purchase with riskier person-to-person sellers in order to chase higher insurance protections or the lifetime insurance. But once development of the game finishes, there will need to be some consideration to the funding model, whether that will be through further ship sales, cosmetics, in-game currency, Squadron 42 campaign sales, or even more scarily for many, the dreaded monthly subscription model. Perhaps ship insurance will play some role in that future funding model. Regardless, the unknown quantity of what will happen with in-game insurance creates a bit of a burning platform, both for players and for the game itself. Perhaps it is for this reason that the Star Citizen team have been intentionally quiet on the subject of in-game insurance for out-of-game purchases. Perhaps the historic sales over the last...
So he doesn't know, possibly. There was a ticket sent in approximately 5 years ago. Somebody asked, will my real money purchases be safe? And a customer service representative at CIG said, all in-game purchases, you will not lose them in-game. That's what they said. But again, even if you have to pay in-game credits for them, they're not lost, right? They're still tied to your account. You're going to be able to get them back. There's going to be punishments for death in every scenario. So that was a thing, and that actually caused quite a bit of controversy around because people thought that went against that original 2012 post that Farrister represented or talked about in the beginning of the video. And then they got mega quiet. And there's all sorts of conversations around insurance, cargo insurance. I think, right now the closest thing to insurance that we're hearing about in recent years is actually in recent weeks, a discussion about Farrister's here. Hello. The idea that any purchased things on the store, like subscriber flare and armors and things like that, are going to be able to be retrieved through the new persistent hangers. So that's kind of insurance. Farrister said, I think the info needs to be clear and accessible. It's very difficult to find out info on this. Even the insurance Q&A is vague and leaves more questions than answers. 100%. 100%. I don't know when you got here, Farrister, but I talked about at the beginning, before we got into the video, this is one of the most polarizing topics there is, because there's no information on it and everybody thinks it should be one way or another. I think a lot of people want a little bit more risk added to the game, and I think a lot of people want not a lot of risk added to the game. And there's so many ways you can go to take, whatever other than LTI will be. So, yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know what the right answer is. But the big thing for me is they've stood pretty steadfast that you're going to get your ship back when it explodes. What they've been a little iffy about is whether or not any upgrades will be there. And I think that that's probably the thing that I would hyperfixate on, because everybody buys ships with real money. And the idea, and again, this is, a hill that I will die on forever, is the F8C that's standing in front of us. I always wanted to be an achievement, something that somebody earned in the game, and that when you see them flying it, you're like, whoa, that guy did this. The F8C is probably a bad example. That guy beat a single player game. Wow, right? But other ships could be better examples, right? That's cool. That's dead because you can buy them for real money. So now nobody knows whether you bought them for real money or if you bought them, in game or earned them in game or whatever, right? So that idea is gone. But improving those ships that you bought with real money has been pretty steadfast as only earned in game outside of the 300i sale. And that they're not doing those type of sales anymore. So with that said, that's where insurance really needs to fixate on, is what they're going to do with your components and how they're going to deal with that. Where I think Farrister's focused on the ships. I think it's hard to focus on the ships, and I think you should always get the ships back. But the components are very different, right? All right, Night Coast, and thank you so much, and welcome. But I think the components is where we should decide where the risk and where the reward is. I'm leaning more towards, depending on the situation, maybe you get your components back, maybe you don't, and then you would have to craft them, grind for them, earn them through reputation, find them on another NPC ship that would likely have them, whatever, right? But that's sort of where I'm at. What if someone buys a ship just to Frankenstein its components? Because purchased ships come with C, D, B stock type components where everybody's going to be working towards A. We've never seen S tier, and modified engineered components, anything like that. So that's more where I'm stuck to, is when we're actually going for best in slot kind of things, what happens with insurance then?
12 years have burrowed so far down the rabbit hole that players are already committed to purchases based on insurance. But equally, it's quite a scary prospect for a game studio to openly publicize that hundreds of dollars of player purchases could be at risk within months of the game launch. Of course, if all players fully understand their purchases and decisions, if all players fully understand that insurance means there's a risk of loss for their purchases in game, but decide to purchase anyway, that's a respectable decision made by the individual. But it's possible that what players expect may be different, based on their own interpretation of their spend. For example, personally, I'd be pretty comfortable with having 6 months insurance on a $50 pledge, then losing the ship after 6 months, as frankly, that's kind of what I'd pay for a subscription for many other MMOs. But 6 months insurance on a $600 package becomes a very
But again, you won't lose that ship. Nowhere did they say you would lose that ship. You just have to pay a little bit of in-game money.
very expensive subscription, so I'd personally be less comfortable with that.
You know, a starter ship, how much is it? 100 between 100 and 500K in game?
You might argue that the onus is on me as the consumer to fully investigate my purchase, but given that many Star Citizen ships are sold before they're even available to play in-game, never mind about clear, recent and relevant communication of what insurance actually means, at least some responsibility should sit with the seller. Indeed, many jurisdictions might find in favour of the consumer in such instances. Ultimately, there may be things that can be done by the developers in-game to encourage players to pay for their insurance with UEC. Big warning messages, very clear, hey, you're in an uninsured situation in the ship right now, in big red text all over the screen, to make it clear that a risky situation is developing and offer an easy solution. Even with that though, you just know there would be players who would ignore it. With all of that, one thing seems likely, that as the mythical Star Citizen release date edges closer to tangibility, this issue may well need to be addressed, either through affirming the statements made back in 2012 and risking media fallout, or by a deviation from that and risking player fallout. Either way, much as with real-life insurance, the end result is likely to leave a bitter taste for somebody.
True.
But maybe I'm all wrong, and you think that in-game insurance will have a happy ending. You can let me know if you agree or not in the video comments.
I think it's impossible for insurance to have a happy ending because using insurance means you died. Meaning, using insurance means you failed. Nobody's going to be happy with the result of what happens there, right? No matter what, you got to get back in your ship and go back. So there's not going to be any happy endings with it. But I think for me personally, interestingly on the screen, I think they need to address some cargo insurance. I think that should be a thing at some point. A lot of people have talked about their FPS stuff and how they don't like that. Are they going to address that? I don't know if they should or if they shouldn't. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think the big one that I think we really need to fixate on is components. I saw D-Rex say in chat that people used to buy Sentinels or buy a Warden and a Defender and just steal their guns and shields off of it. Okay. In the current game, sure. But I guess the response that I had earlier was that in the future, the expectation would be grinding for components, reputation-based things, all things that would be better than what you would get off of a stock ship. So I don't know. It's one of those we'll have to see in the future. But again, I think that insurance is on the Mount Rushmore of things that need to be addressed after server meshing, if server meshing actually addresses server performance and stability. The moment that stability is there, CIG no longer has excuses of works on our servers. Those bugs must be a server problem, and then they actually have to fix them, right? So there are going to be bugs that are going to show up that we've never seen before because the servers are staying up longer, more performant, whatever, right? Once we get to a point where things are stable and players aren't consistently dying to bugs that honestly they're probably blaming on bugs when they're their own mistakes. I've certainly done that in the past. Is once we have that stability, then I think one of the next steps is addressing risk versus reward, and the first place to do it is insurance. So I will always discuss videos and discuss conversations or talk to anybody about insurance because I think it is one of, if not the most important feature in the entire game to kind of make it work, right? It gives reason to a lot of the encounters that you have. Like, oh, do I run or do I stay? Do I fight or do I run? Well, if there's a true punishment for death, you're going to want to run. If you think you can win the fight, you might want to stay because you can get those items out of their ship. I think duping items is another big question when in regards to the upgraded ships. Essentially, you can endlessly dupe high-end components if insurance gives you your ship back over and over again, right? So there's always that. But Farrister said, in hindsight, I wish I had been clearer about your points on ship upgrades, cargo, and those things, but also that I wish there was a much clearer communication from CIG about how this will all work, just to confirm original plans or outline any variants. So many commenters on the video have a different idea about how insurance will work, which suggests to me that it needs to be clearer. Yeah. 1,000,000,000%. Like your video of like, hey, just come out and be clear is very correct. Like, in my opinion, is like the right way to think. Except, how can they be clear if they don't have the foundation of the game to know what they want to do? That's the problem where we are still today. Is that without things like server meshing, without these major things out of the way, not just insurance, every aspect of the game sits in this holding period where everybody is just waiting for the foundation of the game and the boundaries of the game of this is how far we can go, right? These are our limitations. Therefore, if we don't know them, we don't want to speak concretely. And that is where we have been for the better part of 6 or 7 years. And as much as I try to, hey, make the game and make comments like that, we're in such a difficult spot, or they are in such a difficult spot, where how can they speak concretely on anything if the foundation of the game doesn't exist? Mike would be a good project manager. Nothing about me managing the project would make server meshing happen faster, right? The choice to go the procedural planets like we see in the background, which I think we all want in the game, right? And the choice to go full persistence, server meshing, one server, that was a choice they made that put us in the position that we're in for every single gameplay aspect, especially insurance, especially risk and reward. So until they get that done, and it's just a matter of getting it done, and there's nothing anybody can do but hold their hands up and wait. It's tough. It's really tough to point at CIG and say, be more clear, when they have no boundaries of gameplay to decide what clarity they could have. I think insurance is one of those places where you can. And Farrister said, if they don't know, don't sell it attached to ships until they do. I mean, before you got here, we were talking about the Argo Mole and how I personally think mining is in a really good place. But ships came out before mining was in a really good place. That makes mining not make sense, and it sucks. So it's like that can be applied everywhere too, and they do. They still sell the ships no matter what. And it's like those are the arguments around the funding model being a really big problem. We obviously want them to make money, so those really cool planets in the background of the screen are there. But how do we deal with this? It's a bigger challenge than it seems. It really, really sucks, man. It really sucks. I don't envy their position. It's very clear that, sitting here waiting for the game to make any sense is really frustrating as well. So we're just kind of like, what do we do, man? What do we do? It is such a crappy situation on every side. So I try to be empathetic towards them, but at the same time, as the years continue to go on and as the ship sales continue to go on, it is very difficult to be. But I'll
if you're not yet subscribed to the channel but would like YouTube to show you more videos like this, you might want to press that button. And if you thought this video was interesting or thought-provoking, then pressing the like button will give me the prompt to make more videos like this in future. Otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.
Farrister is definitely one of my my go-tos after stream. He does like a lot of really relaxing. I mean, you could tell his voice is really, really enjoyable to listen to. And he does some content like this where it's conversational stuff and on a certain topic, and then sometimes he just plays the game and has really interesting music and it's just relaxing and enjoyable. So you guys should check him out if you haven't yet. Here's the link to the video so you guys can check that video out and get subscribed and all that jazz. But yeah, insurance. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge.